So we can start. DP. Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to the monthly knowledge webinar conducted by Kelp, formerly known as Kelp HR, in collaboration with the Indian Lawyers Association. For all those who are here on this platform for the very first time, I would quickly brief you about what this monthly knowledge webinar is all about. So we at Kelp, along with the Indian Lawyers Association, choose a topic from the PoSH Act or related subject matter and discuss over the same. We also bring upon industry experts as panelists to share their views and observations on the topic. Speaking about ILA, Indian Lawyers Association is a community of lawyers, and they have their chapters all over India, requesting all the lawyers and the law students to join this community and help it grow. Our topic for the day is annual report filing for PoSH. So as all of us are aware that every organization having 10 or more employees needs to abide with the PoSH Act. So these organizations have to file annual PoSH report and include details of the number of cases filed, the redressal mechanism opted for, and summary of the actions taken to the respective district offices. Now, there are very organizations and individuals who have various queries regarding this annual report filing, the contents of the annual report filing, what are the requirements of this annual report filing. And today we'll be discussing over this. We have two extremely talented and experienced individuals who will help us understand the various aspects of the PoSH annual report filing. Speaking of the panelists, I would like to introduce you to our first panelist of the day, Advocate Kanisshka Tyagi. Advocate Kanisshka, an alumni of the Campus Law Center, Delhi University, specializes in real estate, private equity, sports law, and corporate legal disputes. She joined Cade & Boris as a partner in 2011 and co-founded Legal Amicus in 2014, where she continues to serve as a partner. A regular contributor to legal publications and a speaker at law events, she also mentors startups through the Startup India Initiative and other platforms. Welcome, Kanisshka.
Thank you so much.
Our next panelist for the day is Ms. Priyanka Pandit. Ms. Priyanka Pandit, based in Mumbai, India, has been practicing law since 2011, specializing in complex disputes with over 120 cases handled. She is ranked excellent in dispute resolution, commercial litigation by Leaders League. As a counsel at BTG Advaya and Group General Counsel at Garber, she represents clients across all Mumbai courts and pan-India. She is also a certified mediator, independent director, and legal consultant for PoSH and Privacy. Hello and welcome, Priyanka.
Thank you, Sakshi. It's nice to be here.
So for all the participants, please make sure to restrict your questions to the chat box itself, and we ensure to answer most of your questions in the chat box itself, and few of the prominent ones which haven't been covered will be taken up at the end of the session. So without wasting much time, I'll quickly drop in the first question to you, Priyanka. What do you think is the annual report and specific annual report filing requirements as per the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act?
So the annual report is much like a sort of ready reckoner or a pro forma that each company is required to file with the office that they're registered with. So as most of us are aware, it is mandatory not only for organizations with more than 10 employees to have a IC, an internal committee set up, but also to have that registered, right, with their particular district office, whoever might be in charge. This varies from district to district. And along with that, annually, like companies are required to prepare their annual report under the Companies Act, the PoSH Act also requires you to file your annual report. Now, the specific requirements of what this annual report must include are also detailed in Section 21 of the Act and Rule 14 of the PoSH rules. It's really a statistics-based report. Bear in mind, the report does not require you to file any confidential information. So details of the parties, the incident that may have occurred, etc., is not what is required to be filed as part of this report. You're only required to submit statistical data in the sense of how many complaints were there, what was the status of those complaints, whether they're pending, whether action was recommended, have those recommendations been acted upon. If there was no incident, or no incident report can also be filed. Details of the IC, who are the members, what their tenure was, because there is also a rule that puts a restriction on for how long you can be member of the internal committee. So it is in order to monitor, because this obligation is also cast at the second level on the government itself to ensure that these compliances are being put in place by the companies, and the government is monitoring this data. So once you submit this annual report to the district officer in turn is required to file it with the state government as well.
Thank you, Priyanka. Moving on, Kanisshka, I would like you to answer this. What are the key elements that must be included in the PoSH Annual Report?
Thank you, Sakshi, for that question. And Priyanka has already, elaborated on what exactly is a PoSH annual report. Now, talking about what must be included in the PoSH annual report. Basically, the law is fairly simple. The objective of this law is that it seeks to prevent, prohibit, and provide redressal for the PoSH related complaints. And if you see, Priyanka quoted section 21, she also talked about rule 14, which is right. So these provisions of law, if you see what are the contents as per law that must be mentioned in the PoSH annual report, then those very contents actually seek to prevent PoSH instances, prohibit it, and then provide redressal. So the objective, keeping the objective in mind, the contents are designed by our lawmakers. So talking specifically, Rule 14 basically requires you to report to the authorities that have you received any complaint during the previous calendar year or not? If you have received any complaints in the previous calendar year, how many of those complaints did you receive? Have you disposed of those complaints within that particular year or not? And are there any complaints which remain pending, which have not so far been disposed of within a period of 90 days? And have you conducted any workshops or awareness programs for your employees, for your IC members, apprising them of the provisions about PoSH and training them on how to deal or how to behave or how to conduct at workplaces so that your organization provides a safe and secure environment to everyone in your organization? And lastly, you also have to talk about if there have been any complaints, if there have been those have been disposed of, what were the kind of actions that were taken by the employer based on the report submitted by your internal complaints committee. So this very basic information, if you just analyze these pointers, you will find that the entire objective of including this kind of information in the annual report is that you are trying to prevent PoSH instances or cases of PoSH by making your employees, your staff aware about the provisions of law. You are trying to prevent and curb it by reporting to the authorities that we did receive complaints, but we have in fair manner, in timely manner disposed of those complaints. So keeping the entire scheme of the act in mind, the format, I'm using the word loosely here. There is no strict format, but the contents are such that they assist authorities and the organization in implementation of the act and rules. Yeah.
So Kanisshka, what do you think if the organization does not have any number of cases in a year? So we get these queries a lot that we did not have any number of cases in this year. So do you still think they should go ahead and file their annual report?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like your return. Whenever there are persons who do not earn any income, even if they earn any income, they're not required to pay taxes on that income. Still, you file your nil returns at the end of the year. So in this case, even if there are no complaints, that's a good thing. That must be celebrated. That more or less, that there were no complaints this year. We haven't received any complaints. Nil so far, and that must be reported to the authorities that we've not received any complaints this year also. So if you do not have any complaints in your organization in a particular year, that does not absolve you from requirement of filing your annual report.
Thank you
Also,
so much.
Sakshi, I
Yes.
think just to add to what Kanishka said, I think it's important to understand that this is not an optional requirement. Employees don't have any discretion here. It is mandated on an organization to file the annual report. So whether you have an incident or not, the details of the IC are also part of the annual report, right? Rule 14 is very, very clear about what all must be included in the annual report. So of course, that's not, it's a guidance list. So whatever data you have concerning those points must definitely be filed in the annual report.
Thank you so much, both of you. Priyanka, next question is to you. Like, who, according to you, is responsible for preparing preparing and then filing the annual report as per the PoSH Act? So we have organizations, fighting between themselves, and they're like, who is responsible for filing it? Who is responsible for preparing it?
This is a classic tug of war situation between ICs and employers.
Lawyers.
So actually a little bit of confusion there when you read the act also. If you look at the language under chapter 8 of the PoSH Act, right, which says the committee has to submit the annual report. Now here the reference is of course to either the internal or the local committee. So to my mind, when I read this harmoniously along with 21 and then 22, which talks about how the employer is supposed to include information in their annual report, what must be done is, because the internal committee is in charge of inquiries if they occur and are monitoring the situation more closely on ground when incidents occur, and because they have all of the data and information with them, and we must also bear in mind that all of these proceedings are very, very confidential. So there is a sort of a Chinese wall that is created between an IC and the organization generally to ensure that no confidentiality and data leak sort of occur there, and the process is kept pristinely confidential and clear and in terms of law, right? So the IC should prepare this. Of course, it's required to be submitted on the letterhead of the organization. So it requires a bit of collaboration between the IC and the management of the organization to make sure that all of the data is correct. This also helps the management to sort of understand what the ground position is, because they may not always be as closely involved as the IC is when events happen. The IC also meets once quarterly, and those reports are also very critical to be assessed when an annual report is being prepared. So the right way to approach this would be that the IC prepares the report, shares it with the employer, then it's executed on the letterhead of the organization. And the employer then facilitates submission of this, although it's signed by the presiding officer of the internal committee. It must be facilitated to be submitted with the district officer and kept with the employer's records by the organization.
Thank you, Priyanka. So Kanishka, how can organizations ensure the confidentiality of sensitive information while filing the PoSH annual reports? We usually get this query from organization wherein they say that, how can we give out our employee details in this annual report? Should we just mention about the case or the action taken? How do you think should the contents be filled in the annual report?
Right. So firstly, what we have to understand is that the Act, it lays down a lot of emphasis on the confidentiality, right? Whether it is confidentiality during the inquiry proceedings or confidentiality in general. So basically, any information which is personally identifiable, that kind of information, then identity of the aggrieved person or the accused or the witnesses, that cannot be revealed or divulged. In fact, the Act has specific provision which provides for punishment of persons who divulge that information anywhere on any platform to any other person while the inquiry is going on, and in fact, when the inquiry is concluded relating to the complaint. Now, talking about confidentiality when the PoSH annual report is being prepared. Firstly, what we have to see is the Act actually does not require to divulge each and every detail about your employees. So what you can do, if you have received a complaint, you're not required to attach any documents or, describe in detail that this was the case, these were the people involved. You just have to mention that we received complaints and we have either disposed it of or it is still pending, right? And also you can take leave from the book of, actually that's not the right phrase. Bombay High Court came up with these guidelines recently, not very recently, like 3-4 years back, in this case known as P versus A, where they laid down certain guidelines for maintaining confidentiality when it relates to the court cases relating to PoSH. And there Bombay High Court held that instead of full names, only the initials should be used. For example, P, if the name of the person is Prerna, uh, or anything, the initial must
The
be used.
initial arguments.
Similarly, for the accused, also the initial must be used. Then any personally identifiable information like email IDs, contact details, those must never be used. So those guidelines can be followed. Even if while you are preparing your, let's say, an inquiry report as an IC, then also we can follow these guidelines, because that IC report will exchange hands. Obviously, you are going to submit it to the employer. Employer will take decision. Employer is not one person at times; it's a team. And then after decision is taken on that report, that will be filed in somewhere in the office, right? So maybe the record keeping department will have access to it. That ideally should not happen. So in order to ensure that there is complete secrecy and confidentiality regarding that, in reports also we can use initials, and we can make it a point that we do not divulge details about the persons involved in detail, so that it is easier for the reader to know that who are these people. So similarly, following that principle, when you are filing your reports annually, you do not have to divulge detail, which basically uh, through which, after reading which, any person can find out who we are talking about. So contact details, email IDs, addresses, or maybe your identification documents, those numbers, names, full names, etc., should not be used.
So when you speak about these initials that can be used, now if companies do not even want to use those initials, can we just write number of cases received was 1, this was how it was tackled, and this was the action that was taken. It took these many months. Even if that information has been provided, will it suffice?
That should suffice. Basically the idea is that let's say one inquiry report should be distinguishable from the other, right? Either you give a code the way you mentioned, or something like that. For example, in lots of these cases which relate to medical termination of pregnancy, there the terminology used is mother of X versus someone, right? Versus state or whatever. So there also, you are not even using initials, right? So you are using just a very generic term. So, but obviously you need some way to identify that which case we are talking about. So either a code or initials, because initials can also create confusion. There may be uh, two Shwetas in office, right? If you're using S, and there can be two Shweta Sharma in your office. So if you're using SS, so obviously there has to be some. In my experience, the complaints that I have handled as an external member, I've tried and suggested it to the IC members that let's keep a identifiable serial number for each report and case. So that can be, let's say, 1 of 2000 and 2023. So then it will keep on growing if you receive more, increasing if you receive more complaints in that.
Thank you, Kanisshka. That helps a lot, honestly. Moving on to you, Priyanka. How should you think companies address challenges in collecting data and information for the PoSH Annual?
So I think the biggest challenge would be if there is no functional collaboration between the IC and the employer, right? It is only in those situations that you will have a challenge in collecting the data. In some situations, ICs also face a challenge where respondents or complainants are not cooperating, and therefore then they look to the employer to provide required cooperation to sort of make sure that they're able to conduct the inquiries and take matters forward, right? So these challenges can be very, very specific to certain situations, cannot always be generalized. But I think how we should address them is to always keep an open corridor between the IC and the employer in terms of what is happening. I think an internal sort of progress report without divulging information can sort of be done on a regular basis so that management is aware of what is happening. Of course, the ICs are also bound by a very by a timeline within which they're required to conduct the inquiries and complete them. So the timelines are already in place. So if everything is done promptly, if both the organization and the IC function keeping the responsible timelines in place, I think this challenge can be taken care of so that it is preempted and it never sort of occurs. But in very unique situations where it does occur, I think it's also important to maintain a data record so that tomorrow, in case of an appeal or a penalty that is imposed even by, let's say, the government or anybody who's questioning or calling upon the organization, at least as an external member of the IC, what I would advise maintaining is to keep a record at least on email, even if it's through a confidential chain that includes only relevant people, um, to make sure that whatever challenges are faced in collection of this data or information are put on record, so that in case you move on, see, sometimes it also happens without any volition there. Let's say an IC member who was nominated has come to term and is required to be replaced, and therefore the IC becomes defunct, right? And then you find some time lag between identifying somebody else to replace. So these kind of challenges also occur. So helps to maintain a data trail so that anybody who's incoming or outgoing can sort of pick up from where it's left off, and the transition occurs smoothly, and process is not hampered, and everybody is aware of what is required to be given to them as background information, and it can all be done keeping sensitivity and confidentiality in place.
So, Priyanka, when we speak about the contents, so do you think it should only be restricted to the cases that we discuss, or the number of employee awareness sessions, IC sessions, like whatever the organizations do? Should that also be a part of the annual report filing? Is it a good practice to do that?
So it's a good practice. See, although Rule 14 does not require you to include the training workshops and awareness programs conducted by the organization per se as part of the this, I mean, it asks you to put the number of workshops. That's one of the inclusions in Rule 14, right? It's anyway also good habit to put that forward, because as it is conducting regular workshops and seminars and training programs and sensitization activities for the organization is a mandate on organizations. And if you put that as part of your annual report, it also acts as a reference for the new management, new committee. We're also in times where a lot of mergers and acquisitions happen, management changes happen, transitions happen, even between KMPs and such. So having that kind of detailed annual report will also help the incoming management to understand what was done, so that they can carry it forward without sort of any disruption occurring there.
Thank
So
you.
it's always good practice to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Priyanka. Moving on to you, Kanisshka. So, what do you think are the legal consequences of non-compliance with the PoSH annual report requirements?
Yeah, legal, as far as consequences are concerned for non-compliance with annual report, the act is very straightforward. It divides commission of offense into two levels. Firstly is when you commit the offense for the first time. If you've not filed, let's say, your annual report, you may be punished with a penalty of up to rupees 50,000. And then the second level is gets triggered if you have already committed an offense and you commit that same offense again, then it will be taken more seriously, obviously. And then whatever your punishment was in the first instance, you will be handed over with a punishment of the double that quantum. So basically, let's just for example, if let's say 20,000 rupees was the fine which you paid earlier for non-filing of the report. Next, at the next instance, when you commit that offense against, you may be asked to pay 50,000. I said 20, so 40,000, that is double, right? So double that amount you will be asked to pay on the next instance. Sorry for my bad math.
No worries.
So the penalty will double in the second instance. Further, when you have committed the offense for the second time, your license to carry on the business may also get cancelled. So it's very serious. The law at least seeks to achieve that objective of making sure that all the organizations are compliant with it in a very serious manner by providing a serious penalties for non-compliance. So the fine may not appear to be really heavy to a lot of organizations. It will be easier for organizations which have deep pockets to pay that kind of money, but you also look at the possibility of losing your license to carry on business, which is obviously a very serious consequence for any business. So it should not be taken lightly in the end. That is how I would like to conclude it.
Thank you so much, Kanisshka. So, Priyanka, can we discuss the common pitfalls organizations face for filing the PoSH annual report? Like when the time actually comes when they have to go ahead and file the annual report, there are so many queries coming in and they feel like, okay, we have not done this. How do we, state about this information that we have? So what are the common pitfalls or common queries that come in?
I'll begin with lack of training. So lack of training, the absence of knowledge. See, a lot of organizations don't even know that this was required. HR doesn't know, there is no checklist in place, there is no reminder set in place, right? Like I said before, people change, people move, and it's very easy to sort of pass on the buck, which is also common practice because nobody wants to sort of take on responsibility or accountability. But this can cost the organization very heavily. So I think it helps to sort of have a trickle down mechanism to make sure that somebody at the top end is always maintaining and ensuring that these deadlines for compliance are included with all the other compliance deadlines that company usually sort of keep an eye on, right? Like you'll always ensure that you're not missing any tax deadlines, right? So similarly, you must also always ensure that you're not missing these mandatory reporting deadlines. You're not missing out on training your ICs because there are incoming outgoing members. You're also not missing out on training your employees because they sort of need to know, they need to be aware of who to report to, etc., etc. And I think just general awareness can also create a culture of being more sensitive, more open, and more attentive to when you see something out of your work culture sort of happening so that it can be reported and addressed, not with an intention to sort of nitpick or point blame at, but to actually resolve the situation positively, to maintain that healthy work environment.
So I remember this one organization or one query that came in to us, and they were like, our auditor pinpointed this that we did not file the annual report in this particular year, and her reply to that was we did not have 10 or more female employees. Now to again explain her that the act does not mention female employees, it's 10 or more employees, and this is a compliance that every organization has to have. So then these are the things that yes.
Absolutely. See, this is why the right training and the right level of awareness is important, because it's not like people want to be ignorant. It's just that we all have a different way in which we may perceive the same thing, right?
Understanding
So
the flow is like,
exactly.
Okay, we understand it this way, so we'll carry forward in this way. That is how it happens.
Correct.
I would add here, you mentioned about requirement of 10 female. That was a that was not the correct understanding.
Yes.
So basically, I have been an external member in a company, interestingly, for last 3 years, where there are 300 employees, but not even one female employee. So this year, a female employee has joined, but they have had IC for last 3 years. So what we're forgetting here is the definition of aggrieved woman.
Yes.
Aggrieved woman need not be your employee. That person can be anyone who comes in contact with the employees of the organization because of. So even if a client comes to your office and let's say
she's been
harassing incident occurs with her, then also your IC should be present if you have 10 or more than 10 employees, and so that it can be reported to that IC. So this is so interesting that we do not have any female employee. The act is meant to protect females at workplaces, and still you are required to constitute ICs.
Yes, it's the fact that organizations tend to forget that the respondents IC is more in the picture than the female employees IC is something that we need to highlight and make organizations understand this aspect. Thank you so much. Kanishka, next question to you. What role does the PoSH Annual Report play in fostering a safe and inclusive workplace?
Oh, yes. So I have an example for this. I usually share this example whenever I'm talking about this. That imagine a situation, the marks that a student gets when the his papers, his subject papers are checked by his teachers, as opposed to when that person, that student appears for board examinations, which are checked by someone who does not know whose copy I'm checking here, right? So that basically the idea that I want to convey here is that you are being monitored and you will be on your toes if you know that fact that I am being monitored by someone who's not related to me, related in the sense that who's not working internally with me. So firstly, that's the biggest thing that PoSH annual report does. So you may have an IC in place, but you may choose not to, conduct IC proceedings or inquiry proceedings in fair manner, thinking that I am not required to report this anywhere. Internally, there is a requirement. I will, on paper, IC will exist and I will do whatever I want to do. But if you know that at the end of the year, I have to report it to an authority and my data that I submit will be monitored, may be read, may be assessed by someone, and I may be questioned on the basis of that report, then that will definitely ensure people to be on their toes, which means that people will be more compliant and will be more serious towards complying with the provisions of the Act. And basically, the provisions of the Act are nothing but they seek to ensure that the workplaces are safe workplaces for everyone. The act says women, but I would say everyone, because there are so many organizations that I work with who willingly and voluntarily want to be gender neutral now when it comes to PoSH. So
Yes.
idea is to create safe workplaces, and this mechanism of furnishing report annually with the authorities is a very good step in that direction.
True. Actually, I remember this one instance wherein I was in this employee awareness session, and the employee was very keen on knowing that do these organizations have to file in something to any authorities. So he had this thing, and he was like, they can be biased, right? They can choose to be biased to their employees. So does this actually go somewhere? Is there somebody to monitor them? And that's when I told them that yes, they have to submit an annual PoSH report to the district offices wherein they monitor that how everything was carried on and stuff. So I think this really helps for the employees also to understand that this is a safe working culture and somebody is monitoring the organizations as well.
Absolutely.
Moving on to you, Kanishka, how should organizations report on training and awareness programs conducted as a part of the PoSH Act compliances? So do you think they need to attach pictures, or do you think all the information regards we have this thing, IC members and employees, they make sure to take pictures of the sessions just to make sure that in case somebody is asking them tomorrow, like, what is the proof that you actually conducted these training sessions, they have something to show. So do you think these should also be a part of the annual report?
Basically, in my understanding, pictures or video recordings are not required to be part of annual report. However, yes, you rightly pointed out, almost all the organizations, they do click pictures and create that record internally so that because it's very easy to mention in the, annual report that 6 sessions were conducted or 4 sessions were conducted, while actually none was conducted. So to authenticate the organizations which are actually conducting these training and awareness programs, to authenticate that we can back it with data if there is need, they do click pictures and sometimes record the entire session, keep that recording in their records, so that if they're asked that what kind of awareness and training programs did you conduct, we have that data to back our claim. And also, I believe it's a good idea to keep that recording, not just from that perspective that we may be asked, but also you can use those video recordings. If you have video recordings and there are employees, the number of employees keep fluctuating in an organization. So at point when we conducted the training session, let's say there were 50 employees, very next day, few more join, and very after that day, few more join in. So the training programs usually are spaced apart. So it is easier for you if you have the recording of that session that you can share it with the newer employees for their orientation. and it can be used in number of other ways as well. So it's a good idea to keep recording, and if not possible, just keep pictures so that it remains in your record that this person conducted the training, this was the kind of awareness program that was conducted. And if you are asked questions ever, you will have that data. And also generally also for record keeping, you will have that data already in your records.
Okay, so Kanisshka, and one more thing that comes to mind is like, if in case the IC did not have any session in that particular time, so do you think if they do not involve this information, it will be picked out by the district offices and they'll be like, okay, why was this not conducted? Can that be a reason for rejection?
According to me, it should get picked out, because when you are specifically asked to conduct awareness sessions by the law, and when you are specifically asked to mention that information, it means that it is mandatory, right? So basically, laypersons, right? They're not aware of the laws which are applicable in our country. So, however, that is not an excuse, but that is the practical reality. So, if they're not completely aware of the provisions of the law, then how will you ensure that they are deterred from indulging in conduct which is punishable under the law? So, that, according to me, it's mandatory. It's compulsory for organizations to conduct these training and awareness programs. It's not an optional thing that you can skip with. And if you must conduct these, and if you have not conducted these awareness programs, that's a practice which I've seen people falling prey to, that if they've not conducted, they usually mention just for the sake of mentioning in the reports, annual reports. So that should also not be done, because it can be picked out, as that's exactly what the question was. It can be picked out, and what kind of training or awareness program did you conduct?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kanisshka. Moving on to you, Priyanka. What are the best practices for ensuring the accuracy and completeness in the PoSH Annual?
So best practices would be, of course, be familiar with your provisions of the law. At least the IC, external members, most external members are practicing advocates by profession. So please look to your external members for guidance. If you are yourself not aware of the provisions and the legal requirements of what must be included in the report, keep it as inclusive as possible, right? Don't be the judge yourself of what is or is not relevant. I think that is a call that must be taken with a lot of thought and in keeping with the format. So if you don't know what is to be done, or if your organization is filing this annual report for the first time, please take guidance from either your external member, or if you're working with an organization that's providing you external member and PoSH training support, look to them for guidance. In fact, even the authority with which you are registered or the district officer, they also have formats that they can give you sort of a pro forma that acts as a guideline to help you understand what all is required to be put in the annual report. So these are all starting points that you must apply your mind to. Best practices would be to be all inclusive. This is your one chance to sort of showcase to the government how compliant you are as an organization, how PoSH free or how PoSH sensitive you've been. See, an incident occurring may not always be within the control of an organization, right? But how that incident is dealt with, how swiftly, how confidentially, how smoothly, whether any recommendations were given by the IC and were they acted upon in time, right? These are all critical questions that are sort of asked in the annual report and prescribed under the rules. So this data must be included. Again, I'm talking about statistical information. I do not speak of divulging any personal information to breach any confidentiality obligations on us. But these sort of statistics provide a ready reckoner in terms of how safe your organization is, how much it adds value to your reputation in terms of being an organization that is proactive and taking these things seriously to harbor and foster that kind of culture. So these would all then be best.
So when we actually speak about
and highlight everything.
Yes. So actually, when we speak about completeness, there are many organizations who come back to us saying that our annual report was rejected because they state it is incomplete. Now, incomplete, when we look into the annual report, we actually find that the number of cases filed, they've just written, as Kanisshka said, it's just that number of cases filed is 1. This is the medium that we chose, and this is the action that was taken. which case it was, how many days it took, was it actually completed in time. All this information was not included and it was rejected. So when it comes to completeness, like how do you think, when they giving out an information about this one particular case, how complete should it be?
So you can put in information starting from the formation of your IC, saying when was this IC constituted, right? When was this complaint reported to the IC? When did the IC start conducting the inquiry? When was it submitted to the parties and the employer, the recommendations? Within what timeline was the employer required to act upon the recommendation? And has the employer acted upon that recommendation or not? So when you put yourself in the place of the officer who's going to read this, ask these kind of questions, you will automatically understand what kind of data there should be, so that nothing remains unanswered and therefore nothing is missed out from my report.
Thank you, Priyanka. Moving on to you, Kanishka. So how do you think companies should handle cases that are under investigation, pending resolution, or if there are no number of cases at the time of filing the PoSH annual report?
So as we discussed earlier also, if there are no cases at the time of filing annual report, we should just report that there were no cases. That's the fact, right? If there are cases pending at the time of filing your annual report, then basically you have to proceed with it the way you would have proceeded with it if had that complaint been received during the year, and you would have had enough time before filing the annual report to conclude the proceeding. So basically, you should proceed with it normally. You have to mention in your annual report that yes, we've received and it is pending disposal. We've not yet disposed it off. You have to mention that fact within your annual report. But as far as conducting that particular complaint is concerned, it is not at all impacted by the fact that you already filed the annual report and now you have to treat it or deal with it in some manner different from the usual. So you will deal with it the way law requires you to deal with it in timely and fair manner. Fair not just to agreement, but also to the accused person against whom the allegations are made. So that's it. So there is no different procedure that you need to follow for complaints pending on the date of filing of annual report.
Thank you, Kanishka. We'll go to you, Priyanka. So can you explain how the PoSH annual report impacts an organization's reputation and employer branding?
Oh, I think it has a significant impact, isn't it? I think all businesses spend so much effort, resource, energy on sort of building their brand, their name, the trust in the market generally, not just amongst internal stakeholders, but also external stakeholders, investors, and general market in your product, idea, name. Imagine that one badly handled situation can sort of pull all of that down, because once it's out there, like the cat's out of the bag. And there's very little that you can do for damage control, especially in a situation if you're looking at an appeal. We have so many judgments now before us where so many brands have been taken up to court, and courts have lashed out on them for not being aware or sensitive to their obligations under the PoSH Act, right? Which is a very sorry situation. Unfortunately, these are precedents now, which we rely upon and talk about when I'm defending appeals or prosecuting them in court. But this should not be the situation. Which company would want its name associated with a case law for a negative place?
True.
So I think it has a huge impact. And an annual report, like I said before, also acts as a reference for you to sort of do a health check on how compliant you are, but also how safe your workplace or environment is. Is everybody included in the awareness training and sensitization? Are you promoting a culture of safety within your organization? And unfortunately, we're also in times where crimes against women are really, really growing. In these situations, even authorities are sort of tying their laces down and making sure that everybody is being compliant. So it's not like you can sort of get away or slide by those obligations either. So I think it sort of really helps to make sure that it's there and you never expose yourself to that risk. Because like you gave us one example, right, Sakshi, where you said the auditor picked up that you've not filed a PoSH report.
Yes.
So look at the wide length of what you are exposed to. Even external auditors are coming and asking these questions. So as an organization, being sensitive and compliant with this is really helpful.
So right at the end, I wanted to make the exact same point which Priyanka was talking about. The auditor picked it up. So those documents you are required to reveal it in your board report. So if you're a listed company,
Correct.
that will be read by all your investors. So it does, as she has
Yeah.
right, does add to your a lot of weight to your brand building exercise.
See, as an
Thank-
independent woman director, I'll ask this question to the board myself,
Yes.
saying what's happening. So
True. That's very true,
Yeah.
actually. Okay, so last question to you, Kanishka. So, what are the timelines and the deadlines for filing the annual report under the PoSH Act?
Yeah, so basically, if you talk about Act, you have to file it for each calendar year. Usually, all the compliances in our country relate to financial years, but this is different. You have to file it for period starting from January 1st till 31st December.
December.
And you get time till 30th of January next year. However, there are states which have different, slightly different timelines. For example, state like Haryana, which gives you time till 30th April. But your aim should be to complete this exercise of filing annual reports in all these states, in districts, wherever you have your offices by 30th January, within
30th of January.
conclusion of your last previous calendar year. Yeah.
Thank you, Kanishka. Last question to you, Priyanka. So, what advice would you give to the organizations that are filing the annual report for the first time, the very first time, and they're very unclear on what should be there, what should not be included, what if the annual report gets rejected or something like that?
So I think let's shed this fear of rejection, right? This is a very unique circumstance and situation. So please
Yes.
don't let that be an hindrance. Look to the act, look to the rules. If you don't understand it, look to your external member or your legal consultant
Experts.
for assistance. Go to the industry, talk to experts, right? And put in place all the information. Make sure that all the boxes are checked. Even in the event that you've not done something, right? At least the preparation of this report, and because now we're just in August, you still have a few months in hand. You have the last quarter of this year in hand. Start preparing it now if you're doing this for the first time, so that by the time you come to the deadline, you are at least able to take proactive action in terms of whatever you should have complied with at least now for this calendar, and then file that report. And then let that be as guidance. Don't worry about rejection and all of that, because I'm sure you will have an opportunity to address that should it happen, should it occur. So it's not, but as far as you filed something on record, I think the proactiveness is what will definitely be considered. It will be a matter of record that, look, whatever information you had in hand, you followed the law and you went ahead and complied, even if it's not 100% or full, or it gets rejected, whatever that may be, but you've complied. That's important. Another thing is, please put in place, make sure that you are trained yourself. So if you're an HR, if you're a KMP, if you're management level, please train yourself on PoSH. You need not be member of an IC to undergo the mandatory PoSH training that we've been talking about. As a business owner, as a promoter, director, startup, whatever it may be, you must be aware of what PoSH is, what it constitutes, who it applies to, who are the aggrieved, right? It need not just be a client or a visitor or an investor that you're worried about. It can also just be, housekeeping, who's faced an incident, who you will be responsible for. So please don't let these levels, dissuade you from how important this law is for all of us to be aware of. Don't also let the gender bias sort of keep you away from this. I know a lot of organizations think, oh, it's only for women, so it's going to cause abuse. We don't want that sort of policy. We don't want that, to create a divide between our working environment. Please go ahead and put in place gender neutral policies. It's very important here to understand the distinction between the process that is put in place by PoSH and the process that can be adopted by HR generally for gender neutral policies also. So PoSH is a mandate when you're looking at a woman-centric policy, but otherwise also PoSH gives you a sort of guideline to deal with this situation irrespective of the gender that's coming to you. So as a first organization, please take all of this very, very seriously, because if you start this with that seriousness and sincerity today, it'll only trickle down forward and setting a good culture in place. It's a good platform
Yes.
to start.
I think as you start in the very beginning, as you said, that the fear of rejection is so deep rooted in the organizations that they fail to understand that the basic requirements, if you fulfill those basic requirements, it's fine. So, like we had this one
Correct.
example wherein Gurgaon has a proper, format that they have shared. So this organization
Yes.
actually forgot about that format. They filed in their annual report, and the only reason that it got rejected was that they actually mentioned, the government also mentioned while mailing it back to them, saying that we want it in this format. But these people, they panicked so badly and they were like, no, it was rejected. I don't know what else we should involve and everything. And we had to calm them down and explain that the only requirement from the government is the format. They're not talking about the information share. They're okay with it, but they want it in the particular format. So I think these are the,
Exactly.
minor things that the organizations need to pay attention to than the fear of being rejected.
Yeah. Share all fears.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So we'll open the platform for the participants to ask questions, if any. If you have any kind of queries, we have 5 to 10 minutes. So in case anybody wants to ask anything, the points that weren't covered by any of us, if you would want to ask anything, you can go ahead and ask.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
What about a situation where the complaint is received by the company and the respondent is from a different company, and the IC is forwarding the complaint to the IC of the respondent's company? In such a scenario, would the complainant's company need to include that in the annual report or not?
Any one of you would like to take this up?
Yeah, this is very unique that the complaint is received by IC of one company and then it is forwarded to the another. In my understanding, honestly, I have not handled any such case where the complaint has moved from one to the another organization. But in my understanding, the first company where the complaint was received, though it did not relate to their employee, it should be mentioned in the annual report that we did receive, because they did take action on it. Though that action was just restricted to forwarding the complaint to the other organization, but they did receive it and they did take action on it. According to my understanding, if I think of the bigger objective of the act in mind, it should be reported in their annual report that yes, we've received one complaint and we dispose that off.
So that would that not lead to duplication, because the complainant's company is putting one complaint received, the respondent's company will also put in one complaint received. So would that not be a duplication, because it's ultimately only one complaint but being shown by both the companies?
Yeah, but in my understanding, it should be recorded in the annual reports of both the companies.
So can I clarify this, because I have dealt with this situation. So Sandhya, this situation, the annual report that you are preparing is only saying that I received the complaint, but it was forwarded and therefore it was not inquired into by. This sends the check and balance to the IC of the other company, which will then report whether or not a complaint was received by them. If it was received by them, they inquired into it. So there is no duplication of inquiry. And therefore, there is no duplication of reporting the incident also, because you will report it with the clarification that because this did not pertain to my employee who was the respondent was from another organization, I forwarded it to that organization, guys.
So do you think that explicit mention needs to be there?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Because otherwise your organization will be called upon to say, okay, you've written that one complaint was received, but after that all the other 4 boxes are blank. So right. How will you then address that inquiry? So best to give it with the clarification that this is what happened and therefore it was forwarded to the IC of XYZ.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else would want to ask any question?
I have a question.
Hello.
Yes. I think Marita.
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Yeah, please,
okay,
please.
Thanks. I know this was taken up in the initial when the session started, but as we said, the presiding officer would have to notify to the employer as to what are the number of cases that came in, the entire data that has to be presented. So does the information that the presiding officer gives to the employer has to be on the letterhead, or it can be on a plain paper and attached as an annexure when the organization is filing it then at the time of the annual returns?
I'm sorry, can I just simplify your question, Melrita? Are you asking if the annual report must be filed on the letterhead of the company or not?
I wanted to know the information that the presiding officer is giving to its employer with regards to the number of cases or trainings. Does that have to be on a
That
letterhead?
information, so Melrita, that information traditionally, typically now will just be forwarded by email. So I
Okay.
don't think that requires to be put on any letterhead anyway, unless you're working in an organization which is entirely offline, which is very difficult to do in today's day and age, because how else would you create record? So you put it on email and you mark it up to your management and you ask them to then print it on the letterhead and give it to you for proofreading before the presiding officer signs it and then dispatches it to the district office.
So when the annual report is filed with the labor authorities and we have to attach it in that prescribed format in terms of the number of cases and all, do we
Yeah.
have to show proof that it has come from the presiding officer?
No,
Not
nobody is
required.
asking you this. No,
Okay.
because and in any case, the source of the information is internal to your company and the internal to the IC anyway. So if the authority for whatever reason wants to call upon you to disclose that separately,
Okay.
you already have access to the record. So it need not be part of your annual report at all.
Okay. Fine. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, can I just add something to what Melrita asked? You see, the presiding officer prepares a report which is on a plain sheet of paper, and the employer forwards that to the district officer with a covering letter which is printed on the letterhead. So the employer signs the letter which is printed on the letterhead and annexes the report which has been received from the presiding officer. So that is what is the process that is generally followed. I have a second question. I have a second question. Is it necessary to forward the copy of the annual report to the National Commission for Women or State Commission for Women? Because I have seen this practice wherein it is going to the district officer, but a copy is also forwarded to the NCW or SCW.
No, the law does not mandate this. The law requires you to forward this report only one to the employer and two to the district officer. If you're doing any other reporting, it's on you. And if somebody asks you why you're sending it to these authorities when no obligation is cast upon you, the justification is also thereafter on you. So please don't put in place,
In my understanding, it should not.
It should not be done. This is
Yes.
not good practice. This is not good practice at all. Please just make sure that you're sending it only to the employer and to the district officer. Now, if your district officer happens to be, for whatever reason, the NCWC or the CWC, that's a different situation. But otherwise, your obligation is only DO and only your employer. That's it.
So, Marita, I can also see one more question from you in the chat box, wherein you've asked that the label authority has sent a Google form in which the ICC member details and the details from the PoSH annual report, like the number of cases and etc., are required to be uploaded. So I feel the ICC details is fine, because as also if you're if the aggrieved person or the complainant is from outside the organization, your IC details are actually known to the outsiders. That is still fine. And as far as it is restricted to the number of cases, like just the numbers, is fine. But giving out the
Statistical data.
details, yeah, the statistical data is fine, but giving out the details is not fine. So just make sure that whatever is asked is restricted to what can be shared, and it does not override the confidentiality clause.
Yeah, but we may not want to, sorry, to add to it, we may not want to make it publicly known that our company has like 4 cases, 3 disposed of, 1 was a termination. So why would it be required to be put on an Excel which is like floated around?
Is it an Excel sheet or is it a Google form? Because I can see it mentioned Google form, and I think the access to the answers of the Google form is with that respective authority, and it is not open to public for a public.
It is, because that Google form is designed in such a way that when you open up, it goes into an Excel form, and we can actually look at all the different entities that have updated that form and sent it to the district officer. This is for North.
Okay, and not
So
like
if
specifically, can you mention which state from the north?
Gurgaon, so Haryana.
Okay, okay. Yeah, Priyanka.
So, I understand your concern here. Now, Merita, if this situation, if everybody has public access to this link, one, I think somebody must bring this to the attention of the district officer. Nothing stops us from writing to them saying, hey, this link is public access. Can you please make it private? Two, if you are, for whatever reason, having a conservative approach, it is not that you are hesitating in giving the information, it is the manner in which it is being asked that causes concern to you. Nothing stops you from giving this information by email in a separate copy, paste that format, put it on an email, send it to the district officer separately on email, stating your concern, saying that because you asked me to upload it in a public link, I'm sending it to you separately to keep confidentiality concerns.
Yeah, thanks. That's the
Agree with Melody.
plan and approach
Yeah.
we were thinking about here.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I completely agree with
Yeah.
her that you may be okay sharing the details of the IC members, but you would not want to share it with all the organizations within that vicinity, that this is the number of complaints, this is the action that we've taken. And it does not appear to be the right manner of handling collection of data from the organizations on the part of
So
the
maybe it's a misstep, it usually happens. See, we must also understand that human errors are very natural. It can happen within the organization, it can happen at the state level as well. It's not wrong in bringing to the notice of the authorities that, look, this is happening, there's public access given here, if you can please change that. And to keep confidentiality of our information, we are sending this to you separately in the same format that you require. Then they can do the collation at their end. No, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, if I must just add in to what query Melita has, because the same problem was faced because by one of my client, where my clients this Google access was not allowed in their organization because of certain
Restrictions, yeah.
from the IT department. So we had written an email to them stating that we can't access that Google form because of the IT restrictions we have. So they had allowed us to send a separate email as you are suggesting, and they were quite okay with it. So that option is available with the Gurgaon thing. So
Yeah, thanks so much, Akshita, for
Thank you.
confirming. Yeah, thanks.
So thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Priyanka.
We're already over time, so I think
Yes,
we
that's
can.
over time.
So
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for that. So yes, thank you so much, Priyanka, Kanisshka, for taking time out and being here and literally enlightening us with your knowledge. Thank you so much, and thank you for the participants to being participating and making this a good webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sakshi and Kelp, for having this wonderful discussion and for this opportunity. And I hope that this was helpful and insightful for everybody,
Very
including
helpful.
me. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Kanisshka.